didn't know I had to be up here all by myself. God. Hi, my name is Francine. I'm an alcoholic. And I am really very grateful to be here this afternoon. I want to thank Fred and everyone else that had anything to do with my being present today. You know, I'm one of those alcoholics that still finds it a little difficult to believe that people are inviting me to speak at places. You know, I still remember this kid who was falling down drunk, totally acting out for many, many years in the streets of New York. And now people are inviting me places. I mean, I remember when nobody invited me anywhere, and least of all, they wouldn't invite me back a second and third time. And now people do that. And I can only say that it's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am so very grateful for that. I'd like to also welcome those of you that are relatively new to this program, and I know that there's some of you out there. Number one, I've spoken to some of you. I see hands up, but I could feel you. You know, I could feel that some of you are new. I remember how it feels to be very new in sobriety. There's that look, you know. There's a sense about us when we come in here. It's kind of scary, but I just want you to know that you're in the right place. You are in for the kind of treat. I mean recovery. You're in for the kind of treat that you'd never imagined that you could be in for. I mean, when I first came into this program over 13 years ago, and they said to me, keep coming back, it's going to get better, I said, no, you don't understand. It's different for me, because I'm a different kind of person. And I can only tell you that if you become willing a day at a time to do what's suggested in Alcoholics Anonymous, not what we suggest as individuals, but what this program tells us, it comes right out of the 12 steps. If you become willing a day at a time to do what we suggest to you, you're going to find your lives are going to take the kind of shape you never, ever could have imagined. I mean, ever. You know, when I was real new and came in here shaking and my palms were sweating, sort of like they're doing right now, and, you know, just feeling like I was mush inside, there was no way in the world I believed that feeling would ever go away. But I can tell you that feeling goes away, and it's replaced by feelings of self-love, dignity, things that you never, ever could have imagined. So I'm glad you guys are here. Welcome. Welcome to all of you. I haven't been to Daytona Beach in a long time. I think the last time I was here was about 16 or 17 years ago. I was drinking, obviously. And the only thing I remembered about Daytona Beach was that you could drive on the beach the entire weekend, and I was here for the Daytona 500. The entire weekend I was out of it. Is that this? Oh, okay. The entire week I was out of it. The entire weekend I was out of it. But I do remember it was a friendly town. I guess when you're wasted, lots of things are pretty friendly. Lots of people are. But it's a privilege. Is that a message to me so soon in my talk? Should I continue talking? Okay. There's a message in this. Letting it go, doing the best we can. Does it affect the tape if I still speak into it? Okay.
Yeah. I think it's working some. Is it working?
Hello? Is it working now? Okay. Thanks. I was nervous before, but now I'm like petrified. God. That's all an alcoholic needs, something to sort of shake her up a little bit more. Anyway, often people have come to me and said to me, Francine, I think you have the perfect woman story. You know, I would like to have one of my sponsees hear your tape. And the fact is, I've come to realize in my years of sobriety that my story is not a woman's story. It's a story for people. It's a story of hope for men and women if they want to be inspired. That's what my story is all about. I stand before you this afternoon as a living example of Alcoholics Anonymous, an example of what Alcoholics Anonymous can do for you in your life, but more than that, I stand before you as an example of what Alcoholics Anonymous can show you how to do in your own life. You know, there are times when I'm sitting by myself and I just pinch myself because I don't believe that I'm real. You know, from the person that crawled into the rooms over 13 years ago in the condition that I came in here, to to the woman that I am today, a woman that stands before you truly with dignity, it blows me away. And it's all because I chose not to pick up a drink or a drug one day at a time and became willing to do the work in this program. I was born over 40 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'd like to say that from the podium. Number one, it prevents a lot of people from inviting me to speak at young people's conferences, but the fact is I like to say it because when I got sober, I was 26 years old, and I remember hearing that women over 30 were to be put out to pasture. And I was one of those women that grew up with that sick attitude. I grew up believing that when a woman hit 30, forget it, her life was over, she was no good for anything. You know, like a gelding, you kind of just put it out there and you don't worry about it anymore. And the fact is, a day at a time, I've had wonderful role models in Alcoholics Anonymous, wonderful, beautiful, vital women that have showed me that if I stay sober, not only do I have to not drink and use drugs, but that I can become the best person inside that I could possibly be. And so at 40 years old, I stand before you feeling better than I've ever felt in my entire life. I think I look better than I've ever looked. And spiritually, I'm more fit than I've ever been. But I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't remember an awful lot about those early days of my life. I don't know if it's because I drank and used so many drugs and drank so much booze that the brain cells are destroyed. I don't know if perhaps I'm still in a state of denial, even sober as long as I am. Or perhaps the God that I've come to believe in Alcoholics Anonymous just hasn't seen fit for me to have a lot of those old things disclosed, because maybe it might have been a little too painful for me to bear. But what I do remember about those early days was that as a kid, I always hurt. I always hurt. My body always ached. You know, it was as though there was a party going on somewhere, and I was on the outside trying to get into the party, and yet I never could. You know, that's how my whole life felt. Like there was something wonderful going on somewhere else, and they wouldn't let me be a part of it. And I guess if there was anybody looking at me when I was a very small child, anybody that was somewhat sensitive to pain and to children, they probably knew that at some stage of my little life, I was going to find something to make the pain go away. Something to make the pain of being in my own reality go away. I mean, being born in the South, I was black, I was a little girl, and those were things that just didn't seem to fit right in 1953 in Atlanta, Georgia. Although today, Georgia's a wonderful state, and Atlanta was, you know, it's a very cosmopolitan town. At that time, it was run by Lester Maddox, and it was not the most conducive place for a little black kid to be growing up. And while I have to tell you, it wasn't just about race, it had a good deal to do with it. And as I grew older, a lot of those feelings of inadequacy I harbored, and I drank and used because of who I was. But a lot more than just the race was just because I felt different. Because I was a little kid, and we were poor. And I felt different. I just felt different. My earliest escape in life was through literature and the silver screen, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. For me, it was like I had died and gone to heaven when I found out about books and old movies. I mean, I'd sit in front of the television set that we had, and I'd watch women like Betty Davis and Joan Crawford and Barbara Stanwyck and Susan Hayward. I mean, those were my idols. Those were women that were really, really tough. You know, and I used to hear a lot of guys when I got sober that talked about John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart and George Raft and, I mean, the super machos. Well, I related to that too, except it was the women. I mean, I liked women that had a glass in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand, and it was like, look out. And that's how they were, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. They were those women that just didn't take a whole lot of crap off anybody. And I needed that as a role model because I was this little girl with this huge hole in her gut, and it just needed to be filled. You know, at that stage, I didn't care how it was filled. I just wanted to not feel what I was feeling. I wanted not to be who I was. I wanted not to be in the place where I was. And when I looked at movies and when I read those books, for a moment, I was in a different place. For a moment, I was like Cinderella. You know, I was like Cinderella going to the ball. I was pretty. I was smart. I wasn't who I was. And for a long time, that was wonderful, and for a long time it worked, because it took me away from where I had come from. It took me away from the image I saw when I looked in the mirror, which was not the image I wanted to see. The books and the movies worked for a long time, until they just stopped working. I guess it was about the age of 14 years old when, instead of taking me away from the pain of growing up in the South and then subsequently in the South Bronx in New York and being this little black kid, instead of taking me away from that pain, instead of making my reality different, the more I read and the more movies I looked at, the more I realized that this was my life. Period. That was it. I wasn't going anywhere else. I wasn't going to be anybody else. Didn't matter how hard I tried. This was my life. And I suspect on some level, and I have to tell you, I didn't consciously think about this, but I believe deep down inside on some level I thought the pain of that reality was too great for me. And so I discovered something that was quicker, that was more effective, and it did the job. And that was drugs and alcohol. And it was perfect for me because, being a product of the 60s, it was just ripe. I was ripe for the area, for the time. I mean, I went to Woodstock, and I was there against my mother's judgment, but that was the kind of life I led. Rock and roll, drugs, booze, and rock and roll. And that was it. And I have to tell you as well that I didn't get involved in the stuff I got involved with when I was a teenager because I thought it was this wonderful thing that was going to make life better. What was really happening was that I hated who I was so much. I hated where I was at so much that just for a moment, even if I could have the thrill for a moment, it was better than nothing, and that's what the stuff did for me. When I picked up a drink, that's what it did for me. It made me somewhere else, took me somewhere else. I drank and used from the age of 14 years old until the age of 26 when I crawled into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like to tell you that I'm one of those people that was a social drinker and sort of gradually got into alcoholism. But I'm not, and I wasn't. From the very beginning, I believe I was a woman on a mission. From the very, very beginning. And the mission was self-destruction. I hated who I was, and drinking and using made it okay, made it acceptable. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I remember reading the line in the big book that talks about that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And I remember when I saw that line for the first time, it was as though those words jumped off the page and grabbed me around the neck. I mean, I knew exactly what they were talking about. See, I knew what that dark place was all about. I knew what that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization was all about. I lived it every day of my life as a woman alcoholic. I knew what it was like to compromise myself every single day of my life as a woman, to the point that I never realized it was a compromise. I knew what it was like to behave in a way that was inappropriate constantly and then justify bad behavior. I knew what it was like to lie down with scum, because that's what I myself have become. I became willing a day at a time to do anything for my habits, anything. I remember when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I started to share about where I had been in my life, there were women, well, in the last few years in particular, there were women that would come up to me and they would say to me, "Francine, does that dirt ever go away? Do the feelings of feeling dirty and worthless ever go away?" And I can only tell you, in the event there's somebody sitting in this room this afternoon, whether you be a man or a woman, if you've come in here like me, come in here having lived the kind of life that you're not proud of, having done the things that you thought you'd go to your grave before you ever shared with another human being, if you've come in here feeling just a little less than everybody else that you sit next to in a room, then I can tell you that those feelings of dirtiness can disappear. They can be cleansed if a day at a time you become willing to do the work in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not one of those speakers that will tell you that all you have to do is come in here and take up a seat and you're going to get it through osmosis, because you won't. There are many examples of people that are here for years and years, and we're where we have to be, I suspect. But for me, in order to be fully cleansed, I had to, and I have to on a daily basis, continue to do the things you've taught me to do, to behave in a different way if I don't want to feel the way I used to feel. But I can tell you it took me many years in this program before I got to a place where I was willing to do what you suggested, because I wanted to do it my own way, Hip, slick, and cool. I wanted to do it my own way. In 1978, I was first introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't believe that I had a drinking problem when I first came in here. I thought, as perhaps some of you, that it was just circumstances. you guys. Number one, it was truly the men in my life that had created this environment for me. By the time I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had long since seen poverty, I might add. I had found the way out of the ghetto. Now, the sad reality is that I was doing the same things I had been doing years before, but I was doing them in a different place, and so I thought that made me different. By this stage of my life, I was living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I was wearing diamonds and furs, and I was frequenting the right places in New York. So I thought that made me less of a dirty person. I thought that made me less of a despicable woman. The only difference is my clothes were prettier, I had more expensive fragrance, and I was in the right places. But the behavior was the same. The behavior was the same. I couldn't stop drinking, and because I couldn't stop drinking, I couldn't stop acting out. So in 1978, by the time I got here, I just knew in my sick mind that booze wasn't the problem. It was those men that kept showering me with all those things, all that money, all those wonderful little baubles. It was their fault. It was my mother's fault because, you see, she had me, I'm a little girl, I was black. I mean, it was my mother's fault. She wasn't a good mother. It was the fact I didn't have a daddy. I mean, I went on and on and on and on. And as long as I went on in my denial, I couldn't get sober. And in 78, I didn't, because I was so busy saying, it was you. More than that, in 1978, when I was first introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was only 25 years old, and I didn't think that an alcoholic could be 25 years old. I didn't think that. My idea of an alcoholic was that old man down on the Bowery with the overcoat and the bottle in the back of his pocket. That was an alcoholic. And if by chance it was a woman, well, of course it was Susan Hayward in I'll Cry Tomorrow. Susan Hayward was digging out of the garbage can. Of course she was an alcoholic. I didn't do those things. And yet, as I started to peel the denial off as the years went by, I started to realize I did all those things. I remember digging in my garbage can, taking the very last corner of a sip of booze out of a bottle of vodka, because that was all that was there and I couldn't get to the store or the store wasn't open. So I've been that route too. But you know what? They talk about denial in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's where I was at when I came in here. While I didn't come in and get sober in 78, the seed was planted. And I can only say that for me, I am really, really grateful you guys didn't tell me that I couldn't stay here, even though you knew when I was coming to meetings that I was drinking in between. I'm really grateful you didn't say, Francine, you can't stay, because I think had you told me that, I wouldn't be here today. And so if there's anybody in this room that's drinking or using drugs, and you think we don't know, let me first tell you that we do know. You can smell vodka. It comes through the pores. We do know. But even if you are, it's okay. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up, because this is where the seed was planted for me. The end of 78, I moved out to Las Vegas, Nevada, looking for the great panacea, that pot of gold for me. Because you see, what had always been my pattern was to believe that it was the place, it was the person, but it was never me. I was never looking at the problem. And so I thought New York clearly was the problem at that time. And I moved to Las Vegas thinking that it was going to be different. Well, it was different, all right. It was different in that I had more booze, I got it quicker, and I ended up getting sober. That's what happened. In 1979, in June of 1979, I got hit by a car in a blackout. And to date, I don't remember what happened. I am totally incapable of separating fact from fancy. I don't have a clue what happened. All I remember is that the night before, I was in a discotheque in Las Vegas, Nevada, called a Brewery, a discotheque that's no longer there. And the next morning, I came to with my whole body in traction, and my leg was in a cast. And the doctors, they told me that when I was found, that I was found in the street in a direction opposite from my house, and they didn't think I was going to live. And when they realized I'd live, they never thought I'd ever walk again, because when they found me, my left leg had come up behind my head, and the bone had come straight through. And today, I walk around with a 10-inch scar on my leg as a constant reminder of those good old days, just in case I ever forget the price I had to pay to be in this room today. And I have to tell you, it becomes easy to forget. It really does. When you're sober a while, it becomes easy to say, let the newcomers do the service. Becomes easy to say, I don't need to go to so many meetings, I'm sober. Becomes easy to say, oh, I don't have time to do this, that, or the other. Becomes easy to slack up on my program of honesty. Becomes easy to justify perhaps sleeping with someone's boyfriend because it's not their husband. Becomes easy to let up on all the things I've worked hard not to do and be anymore in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's one of the reasons I show up at meetings every day, because I don't want to be back in that place. I know what it's like to live the way I used to live, and I don't want to be there today. In the beginning of 1979, after the accident, I guess it was about a month and a half later, I like to call this my moment of clarity, and that's sort of what I've heard in Alcoholics Anonymous. One morning I came to, and I simply wanted to live more than I wanted to die. And it was nothing more than that. I don't know why on this particular day I felt different than I had felt the day before or the week before. But on this particular day I came to, and I didn't want to die anymore. And I picked up the phone and I called Alcoholics Anonymous in Las Vegas, and I asked them if they could take me to a meeting, if someone could pick me up and take me to a meeting. And the lovely woman on the other end of the phone said, Francine, I don't think that we can get anyone to you today, but if you can just hold on a little bit, we'll pick you up tomorrow and get you to a meeting. And I suspect for me that the God I did not believe in at the time knew I wasn't going to survive. Just knew I wasn't going to make it. And I got a phone call later on that evening from a woman who lived in the complex right next door to mine, and she said, if you'd like to go to a meeting, I'll take you tonight. And I pray to God that was my first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to tell you that I came into this program and I embraced it with open arms. I'd like to tell you that I was the perfect little AA. I did what was told. I obeyed instructions. But the reality is I wasn't. I came in with a real bad attitude. You see, I had brought the attitude that I had out there in here. Didn't go away just because I crossed over a line and came into the room. I've had to work really hard in the 13 years I'm sober to change, to be a different kind of person. And for the most part, that's what my sobriety primarily has been about, change. It started with not drinking and using drugs, but for the most part, my recovery has been about changing the woman that crawled into Alcoholics Anonymous in July of 1979. Because, you see, I believe those old-timers when they told me that if I didn't change that woman, she would drink again. See, I did believe that. And a day at a time, it's been about change. But I have to tell you, it didn't happen that the change came even in the first couple of years, because my first 2 years, my attitude was piss poor. I didn't want to do anything. I sat in the back of the room in what I particularly like to call the inventory section, and I did just that. I took people's inventory. I'd sit with my arms crossed, with my chest out, and I'd have one seat for my body, one for my leg, and one for my crutches, and I dare you to make my day. I just dare you. And I can assure you there weren't too many of you that were capable of doing that. Most of you didn't have what I wanted. I'd come in, and I was a smart person. So I thought, a real slick attitude. I was so smart I couldn't get it. I was so smart I couldn't get it. I hung out with the people on the side of the room who said, honey, all you have to do is come in and take up a seat, and you'll get this thing through osmosis. Well, I liked that. I didn't know what the word osmosis meant until I got sober, but when I found out that it meant pretty much I didn't have to do anything, I thought it was wonderful. All it meant was I could sit here, take up a seat in a meeting, and that it would rub off onto me, sort of absorb itself into my skin. Well, I can only tell you, for me, I wouldn't have stayed sober had I waited for osmosis to take effect. Thank God I had a sponsor who said, if you want what we have, you do what we do. She said, Francine, it's not a mistake that there's a whole chapter in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous called Into Action. She said, furthermore, it's not an accident that in that chapter you're going to find most of our 12 steps discussed. And she said, even more than that, it's not a mistake that the promises are lodged deep within the Into Action chapter. She said, if you want the promises in Alcoholics Anonymous, you've got to get into action. Well, I didn't want to hear that stuff. It was not for me. I didn't want that. All she ever talked about was action, gratitude, service, and God. Things not only I didn't know about, but had no interest in finding out about them. It was easy for me to sit in meetings and take your inventory. And, you know, that has been pretty much my M.O. At least it was the early part of my sobriety. I sat in meetings and took your inventory. I can tell you, I couldn't stand men at all. When I got sober, and yet you couldn't have believed that, because I was always hanging on to some guy. I came in here with men. I always found men, you know. Never could you find me without a man. That was where I got my self-esteem from. But I hated them deep inside. But I have to tell you, the ones I really despised were the women. I really despised the women. And I came to realize in Alcoholics Anonymous that the reason I couldn't stand women is because I couldn't stand myself. I hated who I was as a person. You see, the women I really didn't like were the ones that would get up to the podium, the ones who were really pretty and clean and who had healthy programs, and a day at a time would say, just for today, I don't behave the way I used to behave. See, I didn't like women like that. I didn't like women who said, just for today, I don't sleep with other people's husbands. Just for today, I don't sleep with other people's boyfriends and justify that it's not their husband. Just for today, I'm not wearing see-through blouses and hot pants to meetings. Just for today, I don't curse. I hated women like that because, you see, I was still sleeping around with other people's spouses. I was still sleeping around with anybody. I was still coming into meetings with pants you could slice off of me and blouses you could still see through, and every other word out of my mouth was a four-letter word. So I couldn't stand women who weren't doing that. I would look at them very snuggle. Who does she think she is, Miss A.A.? Well, instead of maybe trying to find out how they changed, it was easier for me to sit back and take their inventory. And that's what I did. But I can tell you that when the time came for this alcoholic to turn her life around, the ones that I clung to for dear life, were the women in Alcoholics Anonymous that were willing to do the work to be different. You were the ones that saved my life. You were the ones, when I asked for help, that I grabbed a hold of you. I didn't let you go. You were the ones that taught me how to be a woman, but more than that, you taught me how to be a lady. I didn't know about that stuff. See, I thought the way I was living was the way it was. I thought that was the way women behaved. And because I had no self-esteem, it didn't matter. I thought that was just the way it was. I thought it was cute if I'd walk in a meeting while people were talking and strut with no clothes on, you know, because I got all the attention. Well, yeah, I got attention all right. But it wasn't the kind of attention that I deserved. Today you've taught me how to behave differently. I behave very differently. I dress differently. I speak differently. I carry myself like a woman, like a lady at all times. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me. Taught me how first to put down the drugs and booze, and then it taught me how to change my life. When I was 2 years sober, when I was going through all this stuff, other things were starting to take place as well. I had been a high school dropout, and that was primarily because education was never important to me. You see, it was always important to have a man, and I always had a man. There was never a paucity of men in my life that were willing to do wonderful things for me. I mean, I had whatever I wanted, but the price was really high. You see, I had to sell my soul, a piece of my insides, for the things that I wanted. And by this stage of my life, I started to realize that something had to be different. I didn't want to keep living like this. I didn't want to be an object anymore. I didn't want to be a show with no brain. That was really what it boiled down to. And so at 2 years sobriety, I made a decision, and it still baffles me that I even remotely came up with this decision. But I decided I wanted to pursue a career that was going to require about 8 to 10 years of a commitment. Now, I can tell you, I could neither spell the word commitment nor could I define it. But yet, I had a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous who was really tough, and she said, if you want what we have, you do what we do. She said, if you don't like the way you feel, if you don't like what you're doing for a living, change it. But I'd say, but Louise, you don't understand. Louise, I'm a high school dropout. I'm 28 years old. I have no skills. What can I do? She said, it doesn't matter. She said, if you want to use all those things as an excuse for not functioning in this world, go for it. She said, if you want to use the fact that you're black, you know, and you didn't have all the advantages of some other people, fine, go for it. She said, if you want to use the excuse that you're a girl and you didn't have all the advantages of some other people, go for it. She said, if you want to use your past as an excuse for not doing things with your life, then do it.
But she said, if you want to learn how to be different, if you want to learn how to overcome those seeming obstacles, and she underscored the word seeming, then I'll show you how to do it. A day at a time through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I did. I got a GED book, and I used to hide it underneath my bed because I was so ashamed to tell people I was a high school dropout. You know, I had lied so much in my life that I didn't even know if half the things I was saying were lies or the truth. But I knew that I didn't graduate from high school. And I would tell people I had, and, you know, I suspect most of them didn't believe me anyway. But even if they did, they sort of kept saying to me, Francine, keep coming back. But I'd hide the book underneath my bed when company would come because I was so ashamed to reveal that information just yet. But I studied the book anyway. I studied that GED book, and I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I worked. And I got my GED, and then I started college in Las Vegas. And I had been out of school for 10 years, so it was really tough. I mean, I kept, you know, I briefly go through this, but the stuff that I went through, just starting to go back to school was unbelievable. The fear, you know, I can't. My favorite words were can't and never. I can't do it. This is why, and I could give you a litany of reasons why I couldn't do things with my life. I'll never do that. I mean, that's all I would say. I can't and never. And you know what? As long as I said can't and never, I didn't. It's that simple. I didn't. But when I started to say I'm going to try, when I prayed for willingness to try, things started to change. And so I was back in college in Nevada, University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 1981. And then in 1982, I moved back to New York to finish college. And it took me 5 years of undergrad. And then in 1986, I moved down to Washington, D.C. to complete my education. And in 1989, I moved back to New York, having graduated from one of the top law schools in this country. And I can tell you that while it may not mean much to anybody sitting in this room, for a kid who used to pay lawyers an awful lot of money to keep her out of jail, it blows me away that I stand before you this afternoon, a member in good standing of the New York State Bar. I mean, it simply blows me away. Thank you. But that's for all of us, because I could have never done it without you. And I'm the first to tell you that. I couldn't have put pen to paper on the application without you. But a day at a time, you've taught me how to do the undoable. You taught me first that I could have all kinds of dreams once I put down the booze. You know, you said that I could dare to dream. And that was a biggie for a little kid like me who grew up on the other side of the tracks. I didn't dare dream because I knew I'd fail. And so why even try? But you taught me how to dream, and then you taught me how to make those dreams come true. That's what you showed me. And that's what my sobriety's been about. I'd like to tell you that I graduated from Georgetown in 1989, and it was smooth sailing from there. But the reality is, the last 4 years have been really tough. In 1989, in July, when I was sitting for the New York bar, it was on my 10th anniversary. I had my 10-year coin in my left hand, and I was writing the test with my right hand, and I failed the exam. And I can tell you it was devastating. The worst thing that could have ever happened to me was that I failed the bar. That I failed the bar and then couldn't find work. You know, that was like the worst thing that could ever happen. And more often than not, I wanted not to tell you. I wanted to keep it a secret. Because again, it went back to those old feelings of inadequacy. If I tried something and failed, that meant I was like not cool at all. I was stupid. That's what I believed. But yet, by that stage in my life, you had sufficiently changed me. And so I couldn't keep it a secret. Thank God for the kind of sobriety I have. And I told you, I let you guys carry me to the next test. And I failed it again. And then I let you carry me for the third time. And I passed it in, I don't even remember, 2.5 years ago. And I was admitted to the bar a little over 2 years ago. And then you made the mistake of telling me that I could have anything I wanted. That it didn't have to end here. You said, Francine, the sky's the limit. If you're willing to do the footwork in Alcoholics Anonymous, you can have anything you want. And so I decided I was going to sit for another bar. Not just any bar. I couldn't have chosen an easy bar exam to take. I had to choose one of the most difficult exams. And the three most difficult are Florida, New York, and California. And I sat for California, and I failed it the first time. And I failed it the second time. And I'd like to tell you that it does not get easier when you fail. It doesn't. The only difference is that, you know what? Today you guys have taught me that if I'm not in the game, I'm a loser. I've got to be in the game. You know, that it's easy for me to sit back and complain about my life and what I want, but that poor me, I can't have it. It's easy to do that. It's a little harder to get up off my little behind and do the work to make it happen. And I didn't want to sit for the bar again. I didn't. But I knew eventually I'd want to live in California. And the only way I was going to be able to practice law in the state of California is if I was admitted to their jurisdiction. I sat for the exam for the third time last February, and the results have not come back yet. They are due back at the end of this month. And, you know, I don't know whether I've passed it, but I can tell you that if I didn't pass it, I will take it again. That's what you've given me. You know, when I was newly sober, they had asked me to make a list of all the things that I wanted in my sobriety. And all the things that you saw on that list, I swear, were the material things that I had lost. And they were innumerable. I mean, I had a lengthy list of all the material things I wanted out of recovery. You would have never found things like self-esteem, like self-love, like friendship, like discipline, like courage, like a faith that works under all conditions. You would have never found those things on any list of mine, because those weren't important qualities. Those weren't important goals to work toward attaining. And yet those have been the most important gifts I've received. The gift of courage, the willingness to keep showing up even though I keep getting knocked down, to get up, to dust myself off, and to start all over again. That's what you've given me. You've taught me that it's okay if I lose to one of my opponents. If I'm out there in the game and I lose, that's okay. I can do it again. But you've taught me that it's not okay to lose to fear, never having tried, never having shown up for my own life. Today I show up for my own life. Today I am an active participant in the creation of my own life. No longer do I sit on the sidelines waiting for you to fix me. No longer do I sit around waiting for a man to fix me. Today men have become my friends, not my masters. You know, one of probably the most important gift for me that I've received in sobriety has been the gift of faith, a faith that does work under all conditions. And I've gone through lots of changes with faith in the years I'm sober. When I came in, I didn't believe at all in God. It was that God of hellfire and brimstone that I got sober with, or that I had grown up with. That old man sitting atop a mountain with a long beard and mandating what I should be doing. And I didn't want to hear about that. Day at a time, the faith that I've come to believe in is very, very different. Very different. It's a loving God. It's a God that believes in me. But mostly it's a God that is willing to stretch me. You know, there are times when I'm afraid and I think I can't do it. But my God gives me the courage to just take another little baby step and move along. But I can tell you the shape and size of my God has definitely changed. When I got sober, my God was a he. And then I went through this radical period in sobriety where my God was a she, and I wanted all of you to know that. I wanted you to clearly understand that my God was a she. And now I can tell you, for me, I'm in a very, very comfortable place with my faith. It is not a he, and it is not a she. When I say the Lord's Prayer, it's my Creator. And that's really right on target for me. And I have to say as well, that was important for me because, again, it was wrapped up in that stuff where men were better than me. You know, I never realized how important it was for me not to have God as a man, for myself. This was part of my growth as a woman. As long as I put men in a God position, I couldn't have men as friends. It was impossible. How could I have you as a friend if I was thinking you were better than me? You know. And when I pulled you down off that pedestal and put you right on par with me, I started to open my life up to the most wonderful friendships with men ever. Ever. You're not down there, you're not up here, you're right here. So it goes to, for me, goes right along that my faith would be my creator, not my father, nor my mother, just my creator. But my faith is the greatest gift I've gotten in sobriety. It's the greatest gift. It's the thing that's made everything possible for me in recovery. Everything. I couldn't have stayed sober for over 13 years had I not had a faith. God knows I couldn't have gotten through school. And I couldn't have worked on the stuff inside that I was afraid to even look at had there not been a God to help me and hold my hand along the way. One of the other special gifts of recovery that my faith has given me is my mother. Like so many people, unfortunately, I think we live in a time where there's a lot of reliance on blame. You know, and again, we have to do what we have to do, I suspect. And I came in like that as well. I came in bashing my mother at every turn. It was my mother's fault. She broke me wrong. That's why, however old I was, I couldn't do the right thing. You know, it was her fault. You know, well, perhaps. But I can tell you that as long as I hated my mother, as long as I was willing to invest in resentments of her, I was a miserable young woman. As long as I was willing to hate her, I was full of resentment. And as long as I was full of resentment, it kept me separate from everybody. Kept me in a position where I could not have a healthy relationship with a man or a woman. With nobody. Because you see, there was always me, Rose, and the other person. She always came between us. Because I carried her around on my shoulder like an albatross. That resentment was so strong and it went so deep. And it was around my second year, when I was doing my fourth step, my sponsor helped me to realize that my mother really did the best she could with what she had. And see, for me, I don't even just give that lip service today. I mean, I believe that. And I behave that way. I didn't plan that my mother would be one of my best friends. I just wanted the resentment out of my life. I just didn't want that noose around my neck. But what's happened in the years, over the ensuing years, is that my mother has become one of my best friends. A gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who would have thought? All those times I was blaming her, I forgot to think about what a poor example of a daughter I was. You know, while I was saying she wasn't such a great mom, I forgot to remember the times I was drunk and would call her up at 4 and 5 in the morning, cursing her out, telling her how she was responsible for why I was where I was at. Always blame. Today I work hard not to be in that blaming, that victim place. And as a result, my life is different. I have found in my sobriety that it has not always been smooth sailing. There have often been disappointments. But I have found that with recovery, I've been able to weather every single storm you've put before me. Every single storm. A year ago, I had to do, for me, what was the most painful thing I have ever had to do in my whole life. In my whole life. I had to put to sleep one of my animals. And it may disturb some of you if you're too new, and maybe if you're too sober, it might bother you to hear about it, and that's life, I guess. But God gave me the gift of love, and God taught me how to love everything. Animals, people, the world. But I learned love through my animals, interestingly enough. I learned responsibility through my animals. You know, I was self-absorbed, totally self-absorbed, self-centered. I didn't care about anybody or anything. And because I had these little animals to take care of, I had to show up. And one of my cats was 16 years old, and he had contracted a tumor. And in a matter of 4 weeks, I watched this big, fat Persian cat be reduced to the size of my arm. And, you know, you guys were there for me. You helped me get through it. First, because you taught me how to talk about that stuff. You know, you taught me how to share about it. And then you taught me how to ask for help. Instead of going out and getting one other animal, because I had vowed I would not get any more cats after that. I had one more at home, and I said, I will not pick up any more animals. This love stuff is too much for me to handle. You know, it's not worth it. Well, again, you've changed me sufficiently. And instead of getting one, I went out and I got 2 more. And so now I have 3 cats running around my little small apartment. And it's fabulous. My house is full of love. My house is full of love. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the gift of love. It's a house that's bright and warm and full of love. In about 4 weeks, I will be making yet another major change in my recovery. And you know, I don't know where I get the courage to do all this stuff. You know, people look at me today in sobriety and it blows me away when they say, Francine, you are so strong. And I look at them, I say, you can't be serious. I wake up with fear every day of my life. I wake up riddled with fear, afraid to take the next step. But the fact is, I do take the next step, despite the fear. And about 6 months ago, I made the decision that I was leaving New York, which was a major decision. I had been thinking about it for the last year or so, but I contemplated moving like years down the road. But I have found that the older I get and the longer I'm sober, the less willing I am to deal with the kind of lifestyle that I deal with today. I don't like the cold weather. I don't like the stress. I don't like attitudes. A lot of things I don't like. And I love the beach, and I love the sunlight, and I love trees. I like that stuff. I like to smile when I walk down the streets. When I was running this morning, while there were some people that chose not to say hello, there were others that it was nice when I was running on the beach, you could say hi to people. I like that stuff. And so I made the decision, as tough as it was, to relocate to Los Angeles. And it was a major decision, and it's very scary now, because New York, I've never broken that umbilical cord. I went to law school in Washington, I got sober in Vegas, I've lived in other places, but never because I was tired of living in New York. Never. And today, I'm doing it. I was in L.A. a couple of days ago, and I got an apartment which really just sealed it for me. I signed the lease. And in 4 weeks, I'm moving out to Los Angeles. And it is so scary. So scary. But again, what you've taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous is to show up for my life. You told me I don't know what the outcome's going to be about. But if I show up, it'll be okay. And that's what you've given me. I love sobriety. I love being a sober woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the way I look today. I love the way I feel. I love the way I behave. I like the way I think. Generally, I like the way I treat people. No matter what color they are, no matter what gender they are, regardless of how they even treat me. You know, I like the way I still, in turn, can treat other people. You've given me that because I've been willing to do the footwork in this program to make those things happen. In closing, I'd like to read from AA-approved literature for those of you that may be AA purists. It's my favorite book, as is all the literature. A plug for the literature. We get sober in different ways, I suspect, but I am one of those people that came in the hard way. I didn't go through treatment. I didn't go through therapy. I got sober right here in Alcoholics Anonymous through the 12 steps. I've had to learn how to rely on a sponsor, not a therapist. I've had to learn how to rely on the books, not other things. Learn how to rely on service. And this is one of my most favorite books. I found all the answers in these books. All the answers that I have needed in 13 years to help me change into the woman that I am today. And I always like to end with this. This is on page 4, and it's entitled, Can We Choose? We must never be blinded by the futile philosophy that we are just the hapless victims of our inheritance, of our life experience, and of our surroundings. That these are the sole forces that make our decisions for us. This is not the road to freedom. We have to believe that we can really choose. You've given me the gift of choice. You've taught me that it doesn't matter where I've come from. It doesn't matter whether I'm a woman or a man. It doesn't matter whether I'm black or white. It doesn't matter whether I have long hair or no hair. It doesn't matter whether I believe. It doesn't matter where the hell I've come from. The only thing that matters is where I'm going. That's what you've taught me. You've taught me it's where I'm headed, and you've provided me with 12 steps of recovery to make that journey wonderful. Thanks for my sobriety.